Morning, everyone. Welcome to the virtual discussion about mindfulness and community partnerships. This is the third panel in the series hosted by Mondelez International about how the concept of mindfulness applies to eating and snacking. My name is Jennifer LaRue Huguet. I'm a former nutrition columnist for the Washington Post. I'm happy to return to this panel series as a moderator to guide you through this virtual discussion. Now, this panel series is part of Mondelez International's Call for Well-Being. It's a call to action for its employees, suppliers, and community partners to work together and develop new approaches to have a positive impact on the well-being of the planet. Our first panel in October 2014 focused on global snacking trends and how consumers can incorporate mindful snacking in their lifestyles. Our second panel, this past July, discussed ways in which tips for practicing mindful eating and snacking, consumer preferences for mindful options, and innovation and R&D are at work to offer people more mindful choices. These previous panels can be viewed at the Mondelez YouTube channel. So today we're exploring the evolving importance of healthy lifestyle programs to foster healthier environments for children, both in schools and at home. We will discuss how different community-based groups, non-governmental organizations, schools, nutrition leaders, foundations, and others are taking a more mindful approach to create healthier environments and communities. So we'll be asking our experts a series of questions for the first 30 or 40 minutes of the panel, and after that we'll be spending some time asking the panel some questions that are submitted by participants. If you're new to the Google Hangout platform, I hope you'll enjoy some of the great features it offers. As I mentioned, we hope you'll submit questions during the discussion. You can do this via the Q&A function. It's on the top right corner of your screen. It's a little square grid that's right next to the question mark. So just click on that and it'll show you the Q&A button and go from there. You're also welcome to use the applause feature located on the bottom of your screen to let us know what you think about the conversation as it goes along. If you should experience any technical difficulties during today's Hangout, please let us know via that Q&A function, or you can reach out to the email that you RSVP'd to. That was mindfulsnackingpanel@inventivehealth.com, and Inventive does not have an E at the end. A member of our team will reach out with support if you contact us this way. So, all that housekeeping out of the way, I'm very excited to be here with our four distinguished panelists. I'll introduce them now. Dr. Sandra Passmore has served as an education advisor for the Health Education Service in England for more than 20 years, developing exceptional quality programs and support to schools. She also works with the Birmingham City Council's Public Health Department. The program she supports in Birmingham, England, has received a grant from the Mondelez International Foundation. Dr. Linda Pfeiffer is a founder, president, and CEO of InMed Partnerships for Children, a nonprofit humanitarian organization dedicated to rescuing children from immediate harm and preparing them to shape a brighter future for themselves and the next generation. InMed has received grants from the Mondelez International Foundation for programs in both Brazil and South Africa. I'm going to pause here for a moment because it seems like maybe I'm not being heard as clearly as I should be, and we're going to just do a little tech check on my microphone. Are we good? How's that? Any better? Okay. Okay. So shall we continue? Bonnie Todd Dix is a nutrition consultant, award-winning author, and director and owner of BTD Nutrition Consultants. She advises clients on nutrition and is also a health and wellness blogger and contributor for Today.com, U.S. News and World Report, Everyday Health, and Dr. Oz, among others. And finally, Nicole Robinson is the Senior Director of Community Involvement at Mondelez International and President of the Mondelez International Foundation, where she leads award-winning community programs designed to promote good nutrition and healthy lifestyles and to inspire volunteer service. So, if we're all ready, we're going to get started. Let's kick off this discussion. Welcome, everybody, again. Thanks for being here with us this morning. So we're going to talk a little bit about healthy lifestyles and community programs. Let's start by talking about the evolving importance of healthy lifestyles in community programs. Would each of you be able to share a little bit about the specific programs or other work related to promoting nutrition among children that you've been involved with? Any one of you can jump in?
Shall I start?
Sure.
Okay, the program that we run in Birmingham in the UK is a program where we work with primary school children who are aged between 5 and 11 years old. We work with them, we now work with 110 primary schools across Birmingham. We work with them for about 18 months. We do a lot of planning, getting them to think about what they're doing, developing an action plan, taking account of the views of the parents and pupils and the staff. So we actually make sure that the change is sustainable within each school, but has a great impact and makes a difference within that school. And what we're looking for is for them to develop quite a substantial change, both in their curriculum, but also in their activities they do around cooking fresh food, growing fresh food, physical activity, involving parents. And so actually we have quite a substantial program that runs, we evaluate it, and what we've seen, we're now in the 5th cohort of schools, so we're now up to the 110. The previous 80 schools that are doing it, some amazing changes that have actually happened, that have actually carried on and has really kind of transformed the work that's actually happened in those schools. So it's something that's really quite challenging to the schools, because we try to demand quite a lot of them, but actually I think they rise to the challenge, and by making it challenging, it actually has a greater impact, and it's something that is really sustainable.
Oh, wow. Sounds very exciting. Thank you, Sandra. How about who wants to go next? Linda?
Yes, this is Linda Pfeiffer. If I could jump in. Our Partnerships for Children program, Health in Action, has been implemented in Brazil for the past 7 years across several states, reaching about 1,000 schools and several 100,000 children. The model is also school-based, similar to the one you just heard, and it integrates nutrition and healthy lifestyles education with the production of healthy foods, with school gardens, and it also incorporates training school cafeteria workers and parents in healthy and safe preparation of food. We launched a new Health in Action program this past July in South Africa. We adapted the model from Brazil to the needs of townships in the Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth areas. So we incorporated lessons learned from Brazil, but adapted them and added innovations such as aquaponics to produce greater quantities of healthy food while adapting to climate change at the same time, and introducing more active play components. For example, hiring and training unemployed youth who act as what we call recess buddies for more structured play.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Bonnie, you want to jump in?
Sure. As a nutrition consultant and a journalist and a mom of 3, I have the great opportunity of talking in my own voice, so I could reach out to the community, go into the schools, whether it's locally in my own area, or actually write stories for schools, for parents, for teachers, and get a chance to really talk about what's really out there. I also have a private practice, so I get to see what people are reading in the newspapers and seeing on TV. And sometimes I kind of feel like I work for the UN, like a translator, trying to translate what the government is saying and what industry is saying, and talk to real people in real terms so that they can know how to go to the supermarket and shop for food, and how to bring their children with them and talk to them about what's really happening. And of course, when I go into schools, I also try to teach teachers, because they're the ones that have our children during the course of the day. And I think that, as we'll talk about later, when you can get everybody on board in the same team, then you have a winning team.
Thank you. Nicole, what would you add? Would you tell us about the work that you do?
Sure. Thanks so much. Actually, my fellow panelists are part of the inspiration for what the Mondelez International Foundation does. There are over 2 billion around the world who are overweight and obese, and many of them are kids, which is staggering. And that's really what inspired the Mona Lisa International Foundation to make a $50 million multi-year commitment to invest in programs just like the panelists described. We have a three-pronged approach of nutrition education, physical activity, and access to fresh foods. Communities are yearning to be more mindful, to embrace a healthy lifestyle, but they just don't know what to do. And the programs that our partners pull together are just a way to help communities do that, to empower them to live a healthier lifestyle and really be more mindful. So we're really proud of that commitment and proud to partner with great folks like Linda and Sandra.
Well, thank you. It's so wonderful to have all of you with your different perspectives and different programs to talk about here this morning. So you all have different perspectives, as I just said. What would each of you say are the main components of the successful community health program or initiative? What makes these things work? Anybody want to jump in? All right. I'm going to make somebody talk. How about Linda, why don't you jump in on that for us, please? Did you hear the question?
Me?
Yes. Hi, there you are. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I did jump in right away, but something was muted on my machine. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right.
Just wanted to emphasize that I think, really a key, perhaps the key component is having an integrated community approach, whether it's a healthy lifestyle program or anything else. And in the case of the Healthy Lifestyles program, engaging not only the teachers and the school administrators, but also the family members to be sure that that what's incorporated in the program in the schools is reiterated many times over in the homes and the community overall. So at Inman, we work very closely with community members to really ensure that the program is tailored to their needs, and also working, of course, with the school systems, the government, and universities. Most of the work is done at the local level, but regional and national authorities are also involved early on to assure support and buy-in, because overall we want to strengthen the local platform for sustainability.
I wonder if others will echo some of what you just said. Bonnie, why don't you jump in? You have a whole different perspective. Can you share?
Well, for me, it's a little bit different because I really try to get to hands-on individual schools. And I think what's so important is having the teachers on board with activities that they could actually do and send home activities for the parents to do together with their children. Part of the issue is that I think a lot of parents, well, time, of course, is the biggest issue, which we'll talk more about later, but one of the issues is that a lot of parents feel intimidated, like they don't know how to cook, and they don't want to get involved in cooking because they're kind of insecure about how to do it. But I think if you make a game of it, if teachers start the conversation at school and then ask the children to continue the conversation with their parents in a very realistic fashion, and then the parents can then expand upon this, maybe by having community potluck dinners where everybody brings their favorite family recipe. Honestly, even if it isn't the healthiest way to do it, then maybe there could be some sort of a makeover at another point. But they could share each other's recipes, and at least it gets people involved. And I think that sharing has become a lot easier with the internet, but even someone could volunteer and make a cookbook, because this is something that everybody loves. We don't all go on Facebook, we don't all do Instagram, even though I'm a little obsessed with those things, but we all eat. And that's one of the things that is the strongest thread that connects us all. Nice.
And I love the component of fun that you incorporate into the whole thing. That's a great addition. So, but why don't we jump over to Sandra and see what you think about what are these common threads that make these kinds of programs work in your mind?
Well, I would agree with the previous two speakers, actually, that I think its key thing is about the engagement. So it's not a group of professionals, whether it's health professionals or doctors or teachers, going out and preaching to people. Is actually making sure that they get on board. And part of the engagement thing is that it's not just doing a few cooking lessons with children and with their parents. It actually has to be planned in so that you give as much time and quality time to that, particularly through the curriculum, as you would do about teaching a child to read or do maths. You know, reading and writing are really important, maths are really important, but actually life skills usually gets the bit that gets squeezed out. And yet being able to cook properly, being able to be physically active and know what you're doing in a way, be able to grow something. It takes time, it takes planning, and it takes consistency. So it's not just doing it occasionally, like, oh, this is the thing that we do this year. Actually, it's actually making sure that every child, every year, and it's about building on the skills and the confidence of the children, linking it in with the parents. We do quite a lot of sending things home, so the children will cook something in their class, and then for homework they've got to cook it again at home with their parents and take a photograph of it or do a drawing. So actually it's trying to get that parental engagement as well. But it's actually doing it in a sustained way. You know, if we're saying these things are important, then actually the time and the quality of the teaching and the engagement needs to be as effective as it needs to be around reading and writing and maths, because it is actually as fundamental as that, really, to a child's health.
Oh, certainly. Well, thank you. I love that concept of building from year to year, too, and not having this just be a one-off experience for the children. So, Nicole, you, I guess, would bring a sort of an overview. You deal with a lot of these different programs. So what would you add to this question or this conversation about what are the common threads? What makes these initiatives work?
Absolutely. You have a like-minded panel, Jennifer. That's the reality. And I think about a proverb, the idea of teaching a man how to fish and they feed themselves for a lifetime. I actually think that's applies to mindfulness as well. It's something that you build over time. It's a muscle. You learn, you exercise it and you flex it and you build it for a lifetime. And I really think our programs, the programs that we invest in around the world, a common thematic with them is really empowering communities, empowering the parents, the teachers, the kids. It's consistent to help them learn and really own what it is to live a healthy lifestyle. I think my friend Linda understated actually the great work that she's doing in Brazil. You know, one example I'd throw out about her work is we talk about the three-pronged approach at Mondelez, and one of those prongs is this idea of access to fresh foods, and that's to ensure that communities can actually actualize and act on the nutrition education they're learning about. So if they're learning about eating more fruits and vegetables, the idea that they need to have access so that there's a grocery store nearby, or there's, in the case of our programs, a wonderful community garden. And in the programs in Brazil, they're over they're in 1,000 schools. The program, many of them have community gardens, and that actually breaks that barrier. And what Linda does is that's really great is the parents learn how to create gardens at home. So long after I talked about a multi-year commitment, long after the funding is gone or it concludes, it's actually the schools have the tools and the parents to continue the work on their own, which I think is fantastic.
Fantastic, and also it seems very fundamental that, like you said, it's no use learning how to eat more mindfully and more healthfully if you don't have the food to eat in the first place, the healthful food. Wow, interesting. So, with all that in mind, how does each of you tailor your program that you're working with to the audiences that you work with? There are, all kinds of ethnic and cultural, economic, traditional, demographic circumstances that must play a role. And also, how have parents, teachers, and community leaders been involved? We touched on that a little bit, but maybe we can expand. That's kind of a two-part question. Maybe I'll throw that to Sandra first this time.
Yes, well, it's something that we need to think about with our program, particularly in Birmingham, UK is a very multi-ethnic city. We have quite a large group of ethnic minorities, both African, Caribbean, Asian, Pakistani, Indian, Chinese, and recent immigration from Eastern Europe as well, so Romania and Poland and other parts of Europe that have recently come to the UK. So what we've done within the program, because there is a structure which is about making sure that each school does within its action plan, creates its own challenges around access to fresh food and growing and cooking. But what it actually does within that, the detail, is up to the school to decide. And part of when we do the program, we spend at least 3 months with the schools planning what they need to do. So what is it that they're doing already and what is it they want to do more of? And that's where we look to engage the parents. So depending on the ethnic makeup of the community around the school, that would then change what it is that the schools are doing. So with some schools, they've actually done quite a lot about if it's quite a high Muslim population around, about bringing the parents in, about making sure that the food is halal, that it meets their religious requirements, but within that, making sure that what they cook actually still is healthy. And if you're trying to promote about fruit and vegetables, we've got schools that are Jewish schools, and so actually making sure that the gardening met the requirement of their religion. But actually, in the end, the schools still need to do more growing, they need to do more cooking, they need to change their own curriculum to make sure that the children are learning the skills. So when you bring it back to the core value of the skills, then actually all the children are improving on their skills. It's just the actual activities will vary depending on meeting the needs of the children and reflecting the local community. So it takes a little bit of adjusting, but actually we're well practiced in that, and it's something that because the program has a degree of flexibility, we are able to make sure that we meet the needs of the community as well.
If I could jump in here, I would just love to add to what Sandra said, because you said something before that was really important, and that was even taking photos of food and sending the kids home to do that. And I think that you could look at food touching every subject. For example, art. Art is one of those subjects that very often gets pushed aside, and yet food is beautiful. Mother Nature's garden is just incredible, the colors. So even teaching kids about having variety and color on the plate and painting pictures in art and going home and painting a picture or drawing a picture of their dinner, that's something that very often is overlooked and is so important in terms of teaching variety. And I think that when it comes to the teachers are great advocates for our programs, but we don't want them to feel intimidated either. So I think that encouraging things like even taste test games where you blindfold someone and taste this. Is it hot? Is it sweet? Is it cold? Is it crunchy? Is it smooth? This is all mindfulness that we're teaching without having to use the word mindful, but you're really using your whole mind, your senses. And that's the kind of stuff that easily could become a game, whether it's in school, at home, and we all don't have time, but on a weekend we could play a little taste test game. Or you could do a make your own pizza challenge. And these are important ingredients to eat. These are, we could call them vegetables, but maybe don't use that word. And say, have like a salad bar at home where you just buy pizza dough in a pizza shop and have everyone make their own pizza. This is creating art, but you're creating healthy diets and you're creating bonds in the family. And I think that you also need to tap into neighborhood resources, because if you have a nutritionist who lives in your neighborhood, if you have someone who has some skills, if you have a chef, there are so many different people you could tap into in your community that really would be willing to volunteer, because it's fun and it's heartfelt, and as I said, it binds people together.
I think people would love to be part of something like that, and would love to be asked. So, I'm sorry, who just jumped in?
This is Linda. I just wanted to second what my colleagues have said, and I totally agree. And just, when you're looking at how we tailor our programs, just wanted to also emphasize the the importance of having a startup phase for these programs before implementing in the schools. Now, a lot of these, of course, are continuing with lots of knowledge and lessons learned, but especially if it's a new area, this period is used to identify not only the communities with the greatest need and for which conditions are right, because, for example, you don't want to duplicate efforts, but it's a period that's also needed to include the perspectives of the whole community in the planning phase. And one of the things that's been so wonderful about working with the Mondelez Foundation is the flexibility that actually Sandra mentioned earlier, and learning from the experiences on the ground and sort of adding that startup phase, because it's so important to include all relevant stakeholders, including parents, teachers, community leaders, local school and health officials, etc., because these stakeholders not only assure that the activities and the outcomes of the program become integrated into the fabric of the community and can be sustained, but they also learn themselves and become role models. And we've really seen that children often don't make the connection, at least immediately, between their own health and well-being and what they're learning and what they're doing every day, but seeing it practiced by their role models dramatically accelerates change.
Thank you. Nicole, is this are these things that the Mondelez Foundation looks for when looking to support programs out there? This kind of awareness of having to tailor the programs and kind of work with the parents from the ground up?
Absolutely. Each of our partners that we invite to team up with the foundation, we invite them to create programs that fall into that three-pronged approach I mentioned, that nutrition, education, physical activity, and access to fresh foods. And what we give partners like Linda and Sandra is freedom within the framework. We know every market is different. There are cultural differences. Kids are finicky. Anyone 13 and under, we want to keep them engaged in a subject that sometimes isn't fun or interesting. And so by giving them that freedom, we're able to deliver the best programs to those markets, and they're tailored. And the great thing about that is you would think that they were different, but we're able to sort of achieve the same outcomes, which I know we're going to talk about later, but I think it's a wonderful thing, and it is something we value at the foundation. It's really the price of partnership.
Good to know. Thank you. Well, I mean, that was a very good segue. Thank you. We were going to move on and talk about some of the changes and outcomes that you've begun to see since you've been implementing these programs. So how about we jump over to Linda and let Linda speak first.
Well, Brazil is where we've been working the longest with the Healthy Lifestyles, Nutrition Healthy Lifestyles program, and we've seen really exciting results. First of all, tangible physical outcomes, quantitative outcomes in terms of improvements in the BMI in both directions, because we see so often kids beginning school, in the first grade or preschool, and they're underweight, maybe even stunted, but by the time they're in the third grade, we see the same children being overweight and obese. So we're looking at the BMI levels being in normal range, and that's something that we've been able to achieve in Brazil, as well as measuring hemoglobin, because anemia is a huge problem in Brazil, and being able to improve the anemia levels so that they're within the normal range of the children. So those kinds of physical measurements, but then there are also the qualitative, with the changes that we can document in knowledge and behaviors, both on the part of the children as well as the teachers, but including the family members as well. And then the anecdotes, when you see, you hear that, at the beginning that kids are never going to eat vegetables, and then you see them partway through the project rushing to fill their plate with the spinach that they just picked that morning. That just sort of rounds the picture. So you've got the quantitative, qualitative, and then also the anecdotes that kind of bring it all alive.
And support one another and showing that you are seeing these successes. How about you, Sandra, in Birmingham? Excuse me. What kinds of changes and improvements have you begun to see?
Some of the changes, I would agree with Linda, that what we actually see is a change in people's knowledge and attitudes. We don't measure BMI because there is a national programme within the UK where all children get measured when they start primary school and when they leave, so we don't do that as part of the programme. We'll measure anemia. What we tend to measure is we look at curriculum changes as well, because that for it to be sustainable within a school, that actually if it's embedded in the lesson plans and embedded within the school, it means it will carry on. We also look with the pupils to measure their knowledge and their attitudes and their behaviour. And knowledge, knowledge is important. I'm not underrating, but actually you could learn about how a plant grows by doing a worksheet or watching a video on YouTube or something like that. And you could still have the knowledge and label parts of a plant, and you could probably still describe a healthy diet. So the knowledge is important. What we actually really look to see is actually have they had the practical opportunity. So it's more about the enrichment of a child's life and making sure that they actually really do. We're a large city. We're the second biggest city in England, so we have a lot of children who live in very urban areas. Some of them do have gardens, some of them don't. They live in flats. So actually it's that practical thing about actually getting your hands dirty really and actually properly planting and sensing that joy really of actually, you plant a seed and you watch it grow and then you harvest the plants and then you eat them. It sounds very simple, but actually for some children, it's that old cliche that they don't see any vegetables except ones that comes in tins and cans and frozen, and actually see that it grow. So it's the enrichment of a child's life, which Linda was talking about, the qualitative stuff, as well as collecting all the, we do a lot of data analysis, but actually it's those stories where you hear about a child who was at risk of exclusion because of their behaviour, because actually they couldn't sit still in class. They were probably borderline ADD or ADHD or those sorts of things, and they're struggling to get involved. And then actually when they can do something that's practical, and they can, a lot of schools also now have chickens, so they can go and feed the chickens and look after the chickens and collect the eggs, and they can actually go water the plants. And it's all those sorts of things that actually help children keep in school, that they have an outlet for sort of some of their other behaviours, about all the stresses and strains that are going on in their lives. So it's about enriching children's lives as well. And I think that having now done it, we're in the 5th cohort of schools, that actually, I said we do challenge schools to do a lot, and so we make sure the infrastructure is in there. But at the end, the reason why we do this is actually to benefit the children. And in the end, if it doesn't feel like a benefit for the child, that it is yet another chore or something like that for the teachers, or the children don't engage in it, or it's not really having an impact on their life, then in some ways we're wasting our time. So it's that enrichment of a child's life that we try to capture with some of the program that we do, as well as the other demographics and the other information that we do. So I wholeheartedly agree with what Linda was saying. It's about engaging with children and within the communities is such a key outcome.
Thank you. Bonnie, we're going to get to you in a moment, but I want to hear from Nicole first, because I'm interested that across these seemingly disparate locales and cultures, there are a lot of common threads. Can you talk a little bit about that for us in terms of, again, going back to the changes and outcomes?
Absolutely. There's a lot of commonality, and Linda and Sandra represent 2 of about a dozen partners that we have around the world, and those 2 are what I would describe our measurement all-stars, because they were a part of a group of partners that came together to figure out what is common from a measurement piece that we could measure around the world, because we knew that they were all doing great work. You can tell by their descriptions sort of the impact. Sandra talking about the children and them being engaged, but we really wanted to tell a story of that good work, and we were able to collectively identify 3 metrics that we would measure around the world. One around increased knowledge around nutrition education, and awareness. So the curriculum that our partners are delivering on the ground, are the kids, you know, absorbing that and learning and retaining that information and actually going home and saying, you know, to their parents, you know, we should have more vegetables. We're not having vegetables at dinner. So are they taking that knowledge back home? Another piece is around physical activity. So many of the programs are in school, which is fantastic. And our kids getting the opportunity to play and jump and exercise. And we want to have 30 minutes per day while the kids are in school. And our partners are pushing against that metric and really trying to make that happen everywhere they are in the world. And then the third metric is around, again, that access to fresh foods piece. There's freedom in the framework around that. In some programs, it's a huge community garden that everyone manages. In other markets, they're hanging gardens and a little bit smaller, but everywhere we try to bring it to life and make it happen, and we can measure the impact of that. So that's that common story that we can tell around the world, which is really an outstanding feat, and not many programs and organizations can attest to that.
Good. So Bonnie, I imagine that you bring a little different perspective, not being involved in exactly the same kind of program that the others are, but can you talk about what you've seen over the course of your work in this area in terms of changes and outcomes?
Yeah, you know, it's different and so much the same. When I listen to Sandra talking about the three-pronged approach, what I think about is how I use the analogy all the time that it's like the legs of a stool. And they all have to be kind of even. They're all just as important, because otherwise you're off balance. And I think that this is something that cuts across all cultures, all socioeconomic groups, because mindful eating and eating healthfully is really not exclusive to a certain group, area, or age. And I think that we could all benefit from it. So no matter what the budget is, because I definitely have counseled those that have food insecurity, and I counsel those that have unlimited budgets. And I can tell you that the people that have unlimited budgets, it doesn't mean that they are eating well. So food, just because food is expensive does not make it healthy, and there are plenty of amazing healthy foods that really cost very little. The key is trying to teach communities and teachers and parents and children about how to shop in season and how to buy in bulk, and how fresh food is not always the best. And sometimes frozen food is better to buy, and canned food is perfectly healthy because canned means cooked. So I think, and if you rinse canned beans twice, then you're getting rid of 40% of the sodium. These are little tips that really are not that difficult to absorb, but they're really, really important for growing your family, just like growing a garden. And I think that when we were talking before about watching a plant grow, if you relate that to children and how their bodies grow, and if you have too much water, just because a plant needs water, too much is not good. And if you don't have enough, that's not good. Neither one of those are situations that will make a plant thrive. Just like for the human body, too much food is not good, too little food is not good. So again, coming back to that approach, it's all about balance.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Gosh, these are all such interesting points. We could talk, for an hour about each of them, but we'll move on a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about how these programs have focused on creating healthier environments for children, and more importantly, how those have evolved over the years that you've been looking at this and been participating? And also, what have you seen about non-government organizations and NGOs? How have they been responding over the years? And how have nutrition professionals changed their approach accordingly? I'm going to throw that right out to Linda. I don't mean to always start with Linda.
Okay, great. Got myself unmuted there. Okay. Well, in terms of the evolution of these programs, I think something that is really important that's going on right now is the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals, which replace the Millennium Development Goals. And with this new focus, we are officially moving to a focus on integrated programs. So the world of development still has a way to go, but in many ways, nutrition and healthy lifestyles represent glue, if you will, that is helping us move away from the silos that have guided so much of development work to date. Silos like, you have health here, education, agriculture, etc. And nutrition and healthy lifestyles often really did not have their own silo because they have and remain to be key factors in achieving objectives within each of these other programs or silos. Like it's nutrition and healthy lifestyles are key in fighting disease, improving learning, increasing productivity. So the good thing, I think, now in the evolution with the Sustainable Development Goals is that nutrition and healthy lifestyles are now a central and integral part of attaining Sustainable Development Goals. And I think the development community, including NGOs, are all moving in this direction.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the other three for responses in just a moment. I'd just like to remind our audience that we'd love to have you submit more questions. We've got some good ones so far, and we'd like to see more. So if you need help doing that, you can email us or use that Q&A function to remind yourself how to do it, or else just send us a question via Q&A. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Nicole to talk a little bit more about what you see in the evolution of these programs since they've been enacted, and particularly how NGOs and nutrition professionals have adapted as they've seen successes and challenges arise.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think what's wonderful, I feel like I've personally, along with Mondelez, have been working on this issue of childhood obesity for over a decade. 10 years ago, there were a smaller group of organizations working on this issue. Today, there are more organizations, and not only are they more, we're working together in a collaborative way that I've never, ever seen before. I think, this chat is a reflection of that it's topical. We're here together talking about it. But I think what we were able to do is convene our partners, and I referenced earlier this idea of metrics. Well, what was really beautiful about convening the partners together, we had partners from all over the world, from Brazil, from the UK, from Germany, from China, all come together, partners that deliver our programs around the world, and they were able to share best practices. So even beyond the metrics, they were able to share ideas around implementation and different ways of working with kids and how to get the parents involved. Every program has a unique piece that's unique to them. For example, in Germany, they have a fair amount of volunteers that actually come in the schools and work with the children and actually fundraise for the programs, which I think is really interesting. In other programs, there's actually a bike that the kids use, and they can work out on the bike, and then the bike, the power from the bike spins a blender that actually makes a nutritious smoothie. That's fun for a kid, and that's a unique way to implement a program. So getting those partners together actually shares that knowledge. And one of our key partners in actually making this happen was the Yale School of Public Health. 10 years ago, I'm not sure we would have been able to partner with the School of Public Health in that way. Today, we're partnering in dynamic ways. I feel like we've become, a partner of choice. And NGOs, public health organizations, we're all working together against this shared goal to sort of reverse obesity trends. So I feel like we're in a fantastic space to tackle what is a really tough issue.
I would just add to what you just said that I think that smoothie making bicycle thing sounds like fun for grown-ups too, not just kids. I like one of those. Bonnie, how about you? You are a nutrition professional. How do you feel your approach and maybe your practice have changed over the course of the years as these programs have taken place and you've seen results out of them?
Well, I personally have been talking about the same kind of approach for over 3 decades. So I haven't changed my tune, even though nutrition seems to be ever-changing. Honestly, it's really not. I think the same basics, maybe it's not the 4 food groups that we had a long time ago, but it really is the same basic information. But what I find to be so interesting is I love to travel for pleasure, and I travel a lot for business. And I've never not visited a supermarket in a place that I've gone to, and I'm obsessed with talking about families, about how they feed their kids. And what I find to be so fascinating and shouldn't be really so surprising is that the family table is critical in terms of sharing more than a meal. It's sharing a conversation, it's sharing a life, and that is where so much can be learned. And I know that there have been many studies done that show that families that share a meal together, and it could even be sharing a snack together if there's no time to share a meal together, even that's important. But these families, the children have less drug abuse, they do better in school, they eat more vegetables. I think that I can't emphasize enough how important that is, and even though that seems like such a small level, that really can be like a ripple in the water in terms of what it does with families communicating to their communities, to schools. And I think that all of that is really critically important. And I agree so much with this panel about how finally organizations are coming together to take a stand on some of the issues that we really need to face together. And I think that I have the pleasure of working with industry, and I do think that a lot of food companies are really trying to have more transparency in the way that they present their products. And I think that media has a huge responsibility. For example, there are so many words that get misinterpreted, like processed food, for example. Media is quick to bash processed food, yet if you took a carrot home and peeled it and cut it, you just processed it. So I think that there's a big role that media plays in clearing up some of the confusion so that people can feel less intimidated and understand that it's really not that difficult to put a healthy meal on the table for your family.
So I'd like to give Sandra a moment to talk about this from the perspective of somebody working in England, and how non-government organizations have maybe adapted there as they've seen results of your program and others, and also nutrition professionals who might have a little different tack there than they do other places in the world.
Yeah. As the common with the rest of the panel, really, I do actually agree with Bonnie that actually nutrition advice hasn't really changed over the last decade or 2 decades or so. I think probably what has changed is about the way that we present it. So that in, when I go back 20 odd years ago, it was about eat more fibre, whereas actually we've now changed that to actually eat 5 a day. So we're talking about food maybe more rather than the nutrients. So rather than eat less fat, it's actually about giving children and parents a way to implement that change. So I think that we've got a little bit better about explaining what it is that we need to do. But I think both Nicole, well, all of us actually, is talking about partnerships. And one of the things about with the program that we run, because we recognise the strength in partnerships, that actually we run various events during the day, during the course of the program, where we actually invite external agencies through. So people who run cycling courses, both for children and the parents, to actually come in to do stuff. Other people who would maybe be able to, who've got some funding to do work around physical activity or other aspects, because it helps to enhance the program. These other programs or NGOs are trying to work with schools, and schools are notoriously difficult to sometimes engage with. Well, we engage with schools, so actually what we're trying to do is to say to schools that if they've got a problem, actually we know somebody who can help you, and actually to try and again to make sure that it is relevant. And I think that that what we've learned as NGOs is actually to make sure that the information that we give is actually to try and make sure that it is relevant to people's day-to-day life, so that we as the experts do the interpreting, and then therefore they can actually understand it and implement it far more simply. Because as Bonnie said, that I think she said earlier on about sometimes she feels that she works for the UN and trying to interpret this message and interpret that message and interpret, and then nuances, that a balanced diet is actually quite a difficult message, because what I would think of as a balance and what somebody else would think of as a balance could be 2 entirely different things. So we talk about a balanced diet, but actually we're talking about 2 entirely different things. So actually I think what we've got better as NGOs is trying to find more about that common language, which is what Nicole was talking about, really, about the common metrics. So even though we've got programs in lots of different countries, there are certain core things that we can actually talk about that are common. And again, that helps about the partnership, doesn't it? So it is about trying to find ways to encourage the partnership, and I think that's probably one of the best things that we've seen changing over the last, the last 5, 6, 7 years that we've seen within the UK.
Very nice, and we just got a question in from the audience. It kind of follows on what we've just been discussing, and thank you for sending your question in. The question is, tell us about some of the barriers communities face when educating children and adults about nutrition and health. What steps are your community programs taking to break down those barriers? Are you seeing impact or results from those steps? And how do those differ among developed and developing countries? So I think I'm going to throw that to Nicole first, if I can. A lot of questions. Good question.
Sure. No, I can begin to talk about the barriers, but I really think that Linda and Sandra are fantastic in that regard, as they're on the ground all the time. I mean, I think, communities are under-resourced, and that's always a challenge. There are lots of goals in every school around math and science and ensuring that kids are prepared in that area. So that classroom time is competition for that. I think what's great, a great thing that our partners have been able to do is actually partner with principals, partner with school districts, partner with government officials to figure out how to integrate a lot of what they do in the classroom. I think there's the bonus, because I think sometimes teachers get a break. They get they're offered a lesson plan, they're offered training. So there are a lot of things that we feel that the schools get and communities get, but at the same time, you need to manage. The challenge is managing that time across the classroom. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things. The second thing I'd say is the parental engagement. We know, all of our partners have told us, the health policy experts have told us, it's really important to get parents involved. I think we're competing for the busy day in a parent's life, from work to school to family time. That's, again, a competition for time and how to get parents engaged. So our partners have been really creative around sending materials home when there are already planned activities for parents to come into schools, using that as an opportunity to sort of build in the message. Bonnie talked about earlier that practical advice about what do you do when you go in the grocery store or you go to market, and how do you make shopping decisions. Those types of things are built in. But I'd love, actually, Sandra or Linda to jump in with other barriers you've seen and the types of solutions you've offered.
Yes, thanks, Nicole. This is Linda. If I could jump in, first of all, I completely agree with the comments that you've made already, and would just like to add that another barrier is the fact that food has such a central symbolic role in most cultures. So addressing healthy eating can often be a real challenge, because in South Africa, for example, every single important life event or celebration is all about food. Often vast quantities of food that are very high in calories, which are prepared with love. And participants in these events, which happen all the time, feel that it's imperative to eat as much as possible. And at the same time, people who traditionally did not know where their next meal would come from might feel compelled to eat as much as possible whenever there's food around, even if it's a lot more available than it was in the past. So changing, addressing these barriers, changing these behaviors really requires starting at a very young age. You can still enjoy these celebrations with food in a healthy, moderate way, but it's something that you need to learn from and participate in from a very young age. And then also, often older people, it's easier for them to learn from the young ones sometimes than vice versa. So really starting young and incorporating growing your own food, which is a great tool for teaching mindfulness, which is really the key here.
Thank you. How about you, Sandra?
Well, what I would add to Nicole and Linda's comments, one of the barriers also that we find is confidence. That actually to make change and to carry on the change, to cook stuff from fresh ingredients, you might do it once, and especially do it in a class and somebody's there right on hand to help you. In every single step you go, what do I do next? I'm not sure. So actually it's having that confidence to do things, which is what we try to help by making sure that, if the children cook the food recipe at school, that the children know what to do, and then when they go home they do it again with their parents. So it's about repeating things, which helps to build up the confidence. It's about time as well, which people have mentioned, but it's like with all things, you can make time for things that you want to do. So you can make time to watch your favourite TV show or make time to do other things, but you need to make sure you find time to look after yourself. And when we talk about mindfulness as well, that actually, it's not just rushing around, it's sometimes just pausing and actually growing something and actually taking pleasure in the fact that you've grown this lettuce or cabbage or whatever. And you know what, sometimes it won't work. And again, it's one of those things that if you're confident, and I'm quite a keen gardener myself, and I will plant some things, and some years I'll have a fantastic crop, and then the next year it's rubbish. And as far as I'm concerned, I've done pretty much the same thing. But it's having the confidence to know that actually sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. Whereas if you're new to it, and especially the first year it fails, you think, well, that confirms that I don't know what I do. So actually it is giving people the confidence, but also giving people the confidence to take time to do things rather than rushing around. And I think that's where it links into the mindfulness, which I know that we've talked upon and touched upon before. But it is about, that multitasking thing is okay, but actually sometimes single tasking is also okay. And looking after your child, sitting down and eating food together, which I know Bonnie mentioned about sharing food, taking that time to actually talk to each other whilst you're eating the food that you've had the confidence to cook from fresh ingredients, it's a different rhythm. And I think that's what we've kind of lost sometimes.
Well, thank you. Bonnie, I'm sure that you have a lot to say about this, but we actually are getting low on time, so we're going to move on a little bit and actually move to the future a little bit and talk about what we see as upcoming trends for child-focused nutrition programming and nutrition education, a little bit about what we've learned that works and what we need to do more of. And then also I'd like just to have each of you speak a little bit about how the concept of mindfulness can fit within those trends. So I'm going to throw that one to Bonnie first, since you didn't get to talk about the last one, if you want.
Well, when it comes to trends, I always like to make one up and say that there's a trend for eating smaller portions. And I say it every year just because I hope it catches on at some point. But I think a trend that we see now, particularly with millennials, is the love of transparency and honesty. To see where our food comes from and to really see clearly, literally transparently, but some even clear packages of what our food has in it. And I think that that trend is something that can be carried over through families and communities. But part of this trend has to occur if we have a little bit more time or make a little bit more time. And I think that what I also hope is a trend is also maybe learning to turn off screens every now and then. And I'm not really just talking about kids, because parents are quick to say, oh, my kids can only watch a certain amount of TV, but the reality is that parents are texting at the table. So I think that we all need to just sort of chill a little bit, and when it comes to food and learning about something that is so important as food, that really trying to take 5 and really trying to turn screens off. We are so overloaded with kids after school activities. We want them to be active, but we are literally overloaded. And I so agree that multitasking really is like that expression my mother used to say, jack of all trades, master of none. You want to be a master at taking care of your own body, so sometimes you really do need to focus on what that actually takes. And if you really want to be mindful, try just a very simple task. If you're not driving, try closing your eyes while you're eating. And that is probably one of the most mindful, most simple exercises you could give. You could pass around a breakfast cereal to kids and tell them to all close their eyes and take one and put it in their mouth. And that one bite will not taste like a bowl of cereal every morning. It'll taste different, and it'll speak to them because they're really thinking about it. So try closing your eyes when you're having dinner tonight.
I'm going to go home and do that tonight. How about you, Linda? What would you say about how mindfulness can fit in the trends you see coming up in the future?
Well, first of all, I'm very thankful for this word mindfulness, because the concept is something we've been working on for a very long time, but it's very recently that I've actually been introduced to that word, which is a beautiful way of defining a very, what can be a complex subject. I really love that word, so thank you for that. But that is really the key, because just again, I had mentioned earlier about not making, children often not making the connection between what they learn or what they do and the outcomes, being overweight or underweight or not feeling well or whatever. But the mindfulness concept is all about just not learning facts, but really participating in the whole process of change, which is this broader awareness. Is really the key to real transformational change. And in terms of trends, what I really see is that the scale of these programs that incorporate nutrition, healthy lifestyles, mindfulness is really growing. And for example, we have a national scale program in Peru that focuses on, it's a treatment program that's for intestinal parasites that's in all public schools in Peru, but we're now working, and there is a climate to incorporate the nutrition and healthy lifestyles on the same platform. So larger scale and also more realistic time frame for the outcomes for these programs. So I really do see that all this broader awareness and this concept of mindfulness on the part of something that's being brought perhaps from through the schools, started at the ground up, which is really now coming in both directions, is as I said, really the key to transformational change.
Well, thank you for that. This is the frustrating part of this panel thing, is we are starting to run out of time. I'd like to maybe start to wrap things up a little bit. I'd like to start just by thanking our panelists for their excellent contributions, all these wonderful insights and observations and tips that you've shared with us, and also our audience for the questions that you've shared with us. So thank you all. Maybe we'll just each go take a moment just to wrap up and maybe speak a little bit more, if you want to, about this concept of mindfulness and the future, or whatever you'd like to say to conclude your remarks with us here this afternoon. Now it is. So let's start with Sandra. Let's see what your last words on the matter here.
Certainly. I would say that one of the big changes that I've seen, and hopefully a trend that will continue, is an increased awareness about emotional health and well-being. So that when we're talking about eating healthily, when we're talking about growing food, when we're talking about physical activity, it's not just about childhood obesity or reducing your risk of heart disease or anything like that. It's also about you as a person, and that the emotional health and well-being, the benefits of being outdoors in the fresh air, gardening, the emotional health and well-being benefits that you get about talking to your family, about sharing times, are absolutely immense. And actually, then I think that it's not just physical health; it's actually emotional health. It's about looking at children as a whole being. It's actually looking at families as a whole unit, and about actually how can we bind everybody together in a way that is supportive and constructive. And so, although these programs, essentially look like they're quite a physical health-related program in terms of cooking and healthy eating and physical activity and gardening, actually it's about the child as an individual and about their emotional health as well as their physical health.
Linda, can you hear me?
There, I just heard you now.
Great.
Yeah, just I think I probably did enough when I was talking about trends, but just that I really am excited for the future because when we started this, it was so much more of an uphill challenge with not a lot of receptivity, perhaps. It took longer to implement the programs, but there's such a growing awareness at the national level in most countries and internationally now about healthy lifestyles, nutrition, and mindfulness. That I'm really excited about our opportunities for the future, and want to thank Mindfulness for putting on this event today, because it really started with a number of groups focusing at the grassroots level on all this, and it's something that now is really catching on, and it's a very exciting development.
Thank you. Bonnie, why don't you lend your 2 cents now? How would you like to wrap things up?
I have a quick 2 cents. For your programs, make them simple, make them fun, know who to go to for credible information because there is so much misinformation out there. And also don't be afraid to be a community leader. I think it's helpful to encourage people to become community leaders, and maybe just to leave is that it's not all about having a mouthful, it's really trying to be mindful. Okay, so try to think about that.
That's nice. Thank you. All right. And Nicole, we're going to give you the last word of the last words here as we wrap up. What would you like to say last here?
I'm actually inspired by all of this and really inspired by the concept of mindfulness. I actually think it's the tipping point. A decade ago, 20 years ago, diet and exercise was a chore to most folks. It was something mysterious that they couldn't get their hands around. Mindfulness, to me, is a way of life, which means that it'll be here to stay, these concepts. It's going to be a part of a lifestyle for everyone. So that really is inspiring to me. And from a future perspective, I think technology is going to be our friend. We're using Google Chat today, and we use a lot of tools today to sort of monitor and keep track of our lives. Technology is going to be part of the inspiration to help us be more mindful and to keep track of that. And I think that's going to be important for young people. So that's really is going to be a part of the future of many of these community programs. So mindfulness is here to stay.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Well, gosh, again, thank you to the 4 of you and to all the folks out there who have listened and participated in our robust dialogue here this morning. We hope you've gained a lot of valuable information about mindfulness and community partnerships, and maybe that you'll bring that information and what you've learned here back to your own communities. Just one more little bit of housekeeping here. I'd like to just remind you that Mondelez will be sharing highlights from today's Hangout on its social media channels, so check for those. And we encourage you all to retweet and share those posts among your own followers in the next few weeks. And we look forward to connecting with you all again. Thank you for taking part here today. Go forth and be mindful.